Do you believe in ghosts? Or do you think it's all just a trick of the mind? Well, you're about to change your mind. Today, I'm going to tell you a story that challenges everything you thought you knew about the supernatural, and maybe even about yourself. And if you got the guts, stay till the end, because I'm about to reveal something no one has dared to tell about funeral car drivers. That's right. You're about to discover what happens when a funeral driver carries more than just a body. Because here's the first uncomfortable truth. Not all the dead rest in peace. Now, picture yourself in the shoes of one of those drivers, alone on the road late at night, with a body in the back, and something else. Something that shouldn't be there. Something that will follow you to the end, no matter what you do. Think this is just a story? Trust me, you're about to realize that the impossible is far more real than you think. And there's more. Did you know that many funeral drivers report events so terrifying, they'd rather be called crazy than admit what they really saw? This isn't just any horror tale. This is a story of a presence that cannot be ignored, something that would disturb your perception of what's real and what's just a coincidence. Stay with me, because by the end of this journey, you'll be asking yourself, what if I'm being followed right now while I'm listening to this? Get ready. What you're about to hear is so bizarre, it'll leave you speechless. Still unsure? Watch till the end, because after you hear what's coming next, you'll see the world around you in a whole new light. And you want to know more. Grim tales from funeral car drivers. The night is always quiet when you drive a hearse. At least, that's what they say. But for me, that quiet has been broken more times than I can count. I've been a funeral car driver for over 20 years, and I've seen things that make your skin crawl. Tonight, I want to share a few of those stories with you. They're the kind of tales that keep you up at night, questioning whether what you saw was real or just your mind playing tricks on you. But trust me, it was a dark, foggy evening, much like any other. I was driving down a long, empty road just outside of town, the headlights slicing through the dense mist. The body in the back, an elderly man who had passed away from natural causes, was covered with a white sheet, as it should be. I had made the same trip hundreds of times before, but tonight, something felt off. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I glanced into the rearview mirror, as I often did when the hairs started rising. But instead of seeing the reflection of the back of the hearse, I saw something else. A shadow, a figure, standing in the mist. It wasn't just any figure. It was a woman, dressed in an old-fashioned black dress, her face obscured by a veil. Her presence was unnerving, as though she were waiting for something or someone. My heart raced as I blinked, and in that split second, she was gone. Just a figment of my imagination, I told myself. But as I drove on, the silence fell heavier, the air thick with an unsettling energy. I thought about pulling over to collect myself, but the road ahead was too empty. There were no houses, no streetlights, just endless blackness on both sides. That's when I heard it, a soft tapping. At first, I thought it was the wind or a branch brushing against a car, but no, it was rhythmic, deliberate, coming from the back of the hearse. It sounded as if someone was knocking, but how could that be? The man was dead, his body in the back, and no one else was with me. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it, but all I could hear was a knock, louder now, coming from the coffin. I slammed on the brakes, pulling the car to a stop in the middle of the road. My breath quickened as I slowly turned around, half expecting to see the old man sitting up, alive and breathing. But no, the body was still there, lifeless. The knocking stopped as suddenly as it had begun. I sat there for a long moment, too terrified to move. Was it just a trick of my mind, or was something else going on? I didn't know what to do. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Slowly, I began to drive again, my eyes fixed on the road ahead. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was watching me. The silence in the car was suffocating. But then, just as I was about to let out a nervous laugh at myself for being so paranoid, the radio crackled to life. "You're not alone," a distorted voice whispered through the static. My blood ran cold. The voice wasn't human. It wasn't even clear enough to recognize the language. It was just a series of fragmented sounds, like a broken record. But the message was undeniable. "You're not alone." My heart pounded in my chest as I fumbled for the dial to turn off. But as I did, the voice grew louder, more frantic. "You're not alone." It repeated over and over, each time more urgent than the last. I couldn't breathe. What was happening? Was it the radio malfunctioning? Or was this something else? I pulled over once again, my mind racing, my body trembling. I slammed the off button, cutting the noise abruptly. But then silence. Total silence. Not even the hum of the engine. It was as though the world had frozen, holding its breath. I sat there in the dark, staring out into the fog, unsure what to do next. My instincts told me to leave the car, to get away from whatever this was, but something deep inside kept me rooted to my seat. And then I heard it, the faintest sound of breathing. It wasn't mine, it wasn't human, and it wasn't coming from the air outside. It was coming from the back of the hearse. I slowly turned my head, my eyes locking on the rearview mirror, and for the first time that night, I saw something I wasn't prepared for. The reflection in the mirror wasn't the empty back of the hearse anymore. The figure of the woman from earlier, the one in the black dress, was standing there. Her face was now visible. It wasn't the face of an old woman, as I had assumed. It was young, pale, and covered in a grotesque smile that stretched far too wide to be human. Her eyes were black, hollow, like deep voids, and they seemed to stare right into my soul. The breath I had been holding escaped in a shaky gasp. I tried to reach for the door handle, to get out, to run, but my body refused to move. I was frozen, my gaze locked with hers, unable to look away. "You were supposed to take me home," she whispered, her voice like the wind howling through a graveyard. "You were supposed to take me home, and you didn't." I didn't understand. What was she talking about? I had never seen her before. But as her words sank in, something clicked in my mind. A memory from long ago. A woman, a driver, a crash, a wrong turn, a life lost, a promise broken. And just like that, I realized that I had seen this woman before. But she had died years ago. She was supposed to be buried, but somehow she was here with me, following me, waiting. I couldn't breathe. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it all. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized how wrong everything felt. There was no way this woman, this ghost, whatever she was, could be here. She was supposed to be dead. But then why was she haunting me? Why was she demanding to be taken home? The air inside the hearse felt thick, suffocating. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode. I had to get out of there. I had to escape. But as I tried to open the door, it wouldn't budge. I pulled harder, my palms slick with sweat, but the door remained locked, as though something invisible was holding it shut. The woman in the mirror, the one with the twisted smile, began to move, her reflection no longer static. She was stepping forward, her feet floating inches above the floor. Her pale fingers reached out toward me, and I could hear her whispering, repeating those same haunting words. You were supposed to take me home. I turned around in a panic, tried to look at the back of the hearse, but nothing. The coffin was still there, silent. No movement, no sign of anything unusual. Was I losing my mind? Was I imagining this? But then, as I glanced back into the mirror, I saw it. The woman was standing behind me, right there in the hearse, inches from my face. Her cold breath brushed against my neck as she leaned in, whispering in my ear with a voice that chilled me to the bone. Take me home, or they'll take you instead. I jumped, my body instinctively recoiling. The mirror, my only point of reference, showed nothing but the empty back of the car. But I could feel her. I could feel her presence, just behind me, her eyes burning into my skin. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to get out. I had to get away from her, from whatever curse I had unknowingly walked into. I slammed my foot on the gas, speeding down the dark road, not even knowing where I was headed. The fog was so thick now that I could barely see a few feet ahead. The road twisted and turned like a labyrinth, and the deeper I drove, the more disoriented I became. The feeling of being followed, the sensation of being watched, grew stronger with every mile. No matter how fast I went, it was as if she was right there behind me, waiting. Suddenly, the headlights flickered, and then the car died. The engine sputtered, the lights went out, and I was left in complete darkness. The silence was deafening, but the faint sound of breathing filled the air again, this time coming from all around me. I reached for my phone, but it had no signal, no service. I was completely alone, or so I thought, and then I heard it, a soft, low laugh, a laugh that sent a shiver down my spine. I turned around slowly, and there she was again, the woman. She was no longer just a reflection. She was real, standing in front of me, her smile even wider now, her eyes black and empty. I couldn't escape. There was nowhere left to run. I told you, she said, her voice cold as ice. You were supposed to take me home. And now, you'll stay with me forever. I couldn't move. My mind screamed at me to run, to get out of that car, but my body betrayed me. I was paralyzed, frozen in place by the horror of what was happening. The woman stepped closer, her presence overwhelming, filling the car with a suffocating coldness. I could feel her breath on my face, icy and foul, as if death itself had taken form. You didn't listen, she whispered, her voice now a low, guttural growl. You should have taken me home, and now you'll pay the price. Her smile grew wider, stretching impossibly, as if her face could no longer contain the twisted grin. Her eyes, those deep black voids, stared into mine, and I saw flashes of a life I didn't know, of a woman who had been wronged, who had suffered, and who was now demanding her justice. Her anger radiated through the car, making the air thick and oppressive. You don't belong here, I whispered, my voice barely audible. You're dead. You're just a ghost. This isn't real. But the woman didn't respond. Instead, she began to fade, her form flickering like a broken film reel. For a moment, I thought she was gone, that it was over. But then, the car shook violently. The windows rattled, the entire hearse swaying as if caught in a violent storm. The fog outside thickened, and the world outside seemed to close in on me. I heard the sound of something dragging along the roof of the car. My eyes darted to the rear-view mirror once more, and that's when I saw it. Her hand was pressed against the window, her fingers splayed wide, her face just inches away from the glass. You're not leaving, she whispered, her voice low and raspy. Not until I'm home. The door, which had been locked just moments before, flew open with a deafening crash. I didn't hesitate. I bolted out of the car, running blindly into the mist, my heart pounding in my chest. I had to get away. I had to outrun whatever this was. But as I ran, the fog swallowed me whole. I couldn't see, couldn't hear anything except my own frantic breathing. I turned back for a moment, hoping to see the hearse, to make sure it was still there, but all I saw was darkness. The fog had swallowed it whole. The woman was gone. For a moment, I thought I had escaped, but as I continued to run, something caught my eye. In the distance, a shadow, familiar, too familiar, loomed in the fog. A hearse. My hearse. The same one I had been driving just moments ago. The headlights flickered to life, casting an eerie glow in the mist, and there, sitting in the driver's seat, was the woman. Her smile was waiting for me, wide and unyielding. I froze in place, staring at her, and that's when I heard the whisper again. You were supposed to take me home. I couldn't breathe. My body froze, caught in that moment of pure terror. The figure in the hearse, her smile still grotesque, stared at me, her hollow eyes never leaving mine. It was as if time had stopped, and all I could do was stand there, paralyzed, while the fog swirled around me like a living thing. The hearse's engine roared to life, its headlights cutting through the thick mist, illuminating the eerie glow of the woman sitting in the driver's seat. But this time, something was different. Her smile wasn't the same twisted grin I had seen earlier. It had turned into something far more sinister, more knowing. She wasn't just angry anymore. She was victorious. "You can't escape," she whispered, her voice a low, almost triumphant hum. "You thought you could outrun me. But you made a mistake the moment you decided to drive me. Now you belong to me." I turned and ran again, but this time my legs didn't move the way I wanted them to. The fog was thick, suffocating, and each step felt heavier than the last. It was like the ground itself was pulling me down, as though the earth didn't want me to leave. I stumbled, trying to find my bearings, but everything around me was shifting, warping, as if reality itself was bending to her will. I didn't know how long I had been running. Time didn't make sense anymore. It felt like hours, or maybe days, had passed. But then I saw something in the distance. A streetlight flickered, casting a faint glow on a small, run-down house. It was the first sign of life I had seen in what felt like forever. With renewed desperation, I sprinted toward it, hoping, praying, that someone would be there, that I could find safety. As I reached the house, I pounded on the door, my knuckles raw from the frantic knocking. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a dark, empty room. There was no one there. The silence was oppressive, almost suffocating. But then, just as I was about to turn around and run again, I heard the sound of footsteps behind me. I whipped around, but there was nothing. The woman, the ghost, she was gone. Or so I thought. And then I saw it, a figure standing in the doorway, her face obscured by a veil. It was her, the same woman. She had followed me here, and now I knew she wasn't going to let me go. "You can't run from the past," she whispered, her voice like ice. "You can't outrun your sins." I didn't know what she meant, but I knew one thing for sure. Whatever this was, it was far from over. She wasn't just a ghost. She was something far worse. Something that followed me from my past, from a mistake I had made long ago. And now, she was taking me with her. I couldn't move. I could feel her presence, like a cold hand gripping my heart, squeezing the life out of me. The woman in the doorway stepped forward, her steps slow and deliberate, each one echoing in the silence. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything, but my body betrayed me. I was trapped, trapped in the fog, trapped in her world, and there was no way out. "You thought you could escape," she whispered, her voice sending chills down my spine. "But there's no escaping what you've done, no escaping what you are." I didn't understand. What had I done? What was she talking about? I had never seen her before, never even heard her name, but she knew me. She knew something about me, something dark that I hadn't remembered until now, something that made the air around me thick with dread. "It's too late," she said, her voice now almost soothing, like a lullaby, but twisted with malice. "You've already made your choice. And now you'll be with me forever. There's no running from it." The fog around us thickened and the house began to fade, its walls dissolving into mist, until it was just the two of us, standing in an endless void. I reached for my phone, hoping to call for help, but the screen was cracked and the signal was dead. I could feel my pulse racing, my breath quickening. My mind was screaming at me to wake up, to snap out of whatever nightmare this was, but it felt so real. And then, for the first time, I realized something. There was no way back. I wasn't just stuck in this moment. I was stuck in time itself. The past, the present, and the future all tangled together. The road I had driven, the decisions I made, they all led me here, to this point where I couldn't escape. "You'll never leave," she said, her voice now full of dark satisfaction. "You're mine now, and the others, they'll be coming for you soon." Her words echoed in the void, a promise of something worse. I turned away from her, my mind reeling, trying to make sense of everything. But there was nothing to grasp, no answers, only the endless fog and her cold, mocking voice. I was no longer sure if this was a dream or if I had truly lost my mind. But one thing was certain, I was trapped. And no matter how hard I tried to run, there was no escape,